early on, I got COVID. I actually came down with my fever the day before they shut Colorado Springs down, which I think was March 16th, 17th, somewhere in there. And I got very sick with COVID. I actually ended up being hospitalized for 5 days. I did not have to be ventilated. And during that time, something happened to me, and I guess it was a near-death experience, if you will, because my oxygen levels were really low, and there was a time that I thought I could just slip away. I could. This would be easy, and I felt really calm about it. Really, I felt a lot of love surround me.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, I just felt this contentment, this well-being that I never experienced. And there was a part of my brain that said, no, you have 3 children who will be devastated if you just drift away. And I could have transitioned right out of this world, but I decided to transition to stay here. And that experience has changed everything.
Welcome to Titans of Transition, featuring real-life stories, anecdotes, and inspiration about pivotal career moments from leaders who have been there. Join host Joe Miller, former scientist and senior technology leader turned executive coach, as he unpacks transitional moments to help inspire change.
Hey, Vivian, welcome to Titans of Transition podcast.
Thank you, Joe. It's so good to be here.
I'm so happy to finally get together with you. We've had some scheduling issues. We're dealing with that kind of a year anyway, but...
Yep. I was just going to say the same thing, kind of funky year and... Yep.
Yeah, I'm really been looking forward to talking to you about your transitions in your career and your life. It's one of those great privileges to have a good colleague and friend recommend you to come on to this show. Robert Kittredge, who's another John Maxwell team member along with me. And I've been looking forward to this, and you've got an interesting background. And so why don't you let our listeners know what you're currently doing, and then we'll kind of walk through some of those key transitions that you've had over time.
Sure, absolutely. What I'm doing currently is I still have my own real estate brokerage company, Cobb Real Estate. So I'm a realtor, mostly residential. And that's been a very interesting journey in and of itself during this time. But I've also have another passion, which is public speaking and speaker coach. So I've been doing some of that. I'd like to do more of that. So I've been working on that as well.
So the speaker coach kind of stuff, are you involved in any associations or communities around speaker training as well?
Absolutely. I'm a distinguished Toastmaster. I got that this year in 2020, so I'm very proud of that. And very involved with Toastmasters, just was an area director, taking off a year from the leadership side and going back and more heavily into the speaking side. And I have some speaking engagements coming up, so that's very, very exciting. But Toastmasters is my probably biggest involvement. I do dabble, have gone to the National Speakers Association meetings and that sort of thing, still trying to decide if I'm going to go that route as well. But yeah.
There's not a lot of live meetings right now, but
no,
it's good to have that community there.
And part of 2020 has been transitioning from in-person stages to digital stages, which is a little bit of a challenge, especially for me, because I have a pretty big personality and I come across on stage very, very well. And so trying to fit that into a little box on the screen has been kind of challenging, but it's been fun too. So
Yeah, that's another kind of transition. So why don't you tell us a little bit exactly? Sometimes it's a little difficult. I usually what I do, folks, is I ask the guests to think about some transitions they want to share. And so let me just step back a second and say, the purpose of this podcast is really to encourage you, encourage the listeners, encourage all of us to be more aware of where we are in terms of our life and our career. And is it meeting what we feel like our purpose is? What our vision for our life? Do we feel like we're on track? And sometimes we are in between different roles or in between different jobs, those kinds of things. Or sometimes we just sense in that zone that everything's perfect. We're really jazzed about things. Other times we're like, there's, something's not quite, something not quite right. So these are like what I would call changes or transitions that you're initiating. You're sensing something. And then we get into those transitions. Then it's a question of, how do we get clarity around what we're moving towards? How do we navigate the transition itself? And then once we're past it, we're in a new role or a new situation, how do we optimize that? How do we grow through it? And then there's a whole different class of transitions. And I think, you and I have talked a little bit before we press the record button about things being pushed upon us, or I've used the language thrust upon us. And of course, 2020 was a whole thrust upon us year. But yeah. I think, by way of introduction, yeah, so the whole purpose of it is just to help encourage everyone on how to navigate these transitions, for the better in our lives. So with that introduction, why don't you take us through some of the transitions that you selected today?
Absolutely, would love to. I think most of my life, I'm one of those people. I think there are people out there that everything goes really smoothly for them, and their transitions, like you said, are ones that they choose. And then there are other people like me where my transitions in life have been definitely thrust upon me. And the two stories that I'm going to tell you today are, the first one is a transition that happened to me a little over 9 years ago when I lost my husband very suddenly to colon cancer. But not only did I lose my husband, unbeknownst to me at the time, we were in financial dire straits. And I found out most of that after he passed. And from diagnosis to death, was 3.5 weeks. So it was a very sudden death. But then after that, it was also a huge recognition of that he had left the situation not as I expected.
So you weren't aware, Vivian, you weren't aware of the financial situation at the time he passed?
No.
At all?
No. I knew, I had little hints that things were a little awry, but I was so concerned about his health that I didn't really pry on, he was a multimillionaire when I married him. And we were together 10 years. So it was a second marriage for both of us. And we were married a total of 4 years, but we had dated for 6 prior to our marriage. And he always picked up the tab. When we went out to dinner, didn't matter how many people, if it was 2 other people or 10 other people, he always picked up the tab. And he made a comment. We got invited to dinner and he said, well, I really don't want to go. And I thought it was because he wasn't feeling well, but he made an offhand comment, everybody will expect me to pay. And I thought, well, why can't you pay? But I never really kind of put the two of them together. So yeah, he kept that from me. So when he died, I found out our house was 4 months behind and it was in foreclosure. there was only $5,000 in his checking account. I mean, he had drained everything. And so I lost my house. I lost my buying power because I had taken out cash advances on my credit cards to fund some of his property investments. So my credit just tanked. So I lost my buying power. I lost my home. I lost my lifestyle. I pretty much was financially completely obliterated just overnight. And
You
I
lost
certainly was.
you lost your husband, and you also
Yes,
lost your future financial stability, all like overnight.
just like that. And he had stopped payments on his life insurance, so there was no life insurance. I mean, there was nothing. So talk about having a transition thrust on you.
Oh man.
And so I had to completely rebuild my life from probably below ground because and I will talk later about the graciousness of having people in your life. I had friends that stepped up, let me, gave me money, borrowed me money, so I wouldn't be, under a bridge somewhere. So it was quite the blow, and at the time I was 51 years old, and at that time I thought my life was set. I thought, and to have
So,
to just start over from nothing was interesting.
well, I mean,
But I did it.
I'm just curious. Did were you doing anything on the side? I mean, maybe not. I mean, if he supposedly was,
Well, I had my real estate
no, you
license
did.
because he was investing in properties, and so I was I was able to uh, handle his transactions and save him commissions and that sort of thing. But at the end, he was doing all of his transactions in Florida.
Mm.
And this was right before 2008 when everything tanked. So I wasn't doing his deals for him, but in Florida. I didn't have my license in Florida. But if he did transactions in Colorado, I would handle those. So I was dabbling in real estate, doing it part time, but I really didn't have to work.
So
And
what did you do then once all the dust settled, so to speak? I mean, did you leverage having your real estate license and try to
Well, thank
associate
God I
with?
had that. I mean, and with any business, and especially entrepreneur, I'll tell you, it takes a year or two to, get going. I had some contacts. I did some deals. Certainly not enough to sustain me on a full-time basis in the beginning. But yeah, thank God I had my real estate license, and I was working. I was working right away. um, just dove right in
So
and
you didn't really
built
have
my
any,
business.
and this may be prying, but you didn't really have any time to get angry about the situation almost. You,
Well, it's funny
or
you
did
bring
you?
that up because he left the estate just absolute disarray. In fact, instead of getting to spend the last 3 weeks with him, I was running around because he didn't have a will. I was running around getting his affairs in order. Uh, and so at least we got a will done before he died. And then, yes, I had creditors, just tons of creditors coming down on me. It took about 5 years to settle his estate and get the creditors paid off. And you're absolutely right, Joe. It wasn't until I got all that chaos out of my life that I could actually start grieving and yes, be very angry. I was angry during that time, but at least I finally had time to face that anger. But yeah, I was a little pissed off. Yeah.
I would imagine so. Goodness.
Now we could laugh about it. I was a pretty angry lady for quite a while. Yes.
No, I know we're going to surface up some of these after you tell your sort of your second transition, but I'm just kind of wondering. for people going through a similar situation, what would you say to them?
Wow, there's so much that I learned from that experience. And I learned how strong I can be, what a strong person I am. I learned that you're going to lose people along the way that you thought would be there for you, and you're going to gain people along the way that you had no idea were going to be there for you. That was probably one of my biggest lessons, and to be open to that, to be aware of that, because a lot of times people run not because they don't love you or because they don't support you, but a lot of people just don't know what to say. I mean, the devastation was so great, and when you think about it, it's kind of the two top biggest fears of people, loss of their spouse or a child or any kind of catastrophic loss in their life, and losing their money.
Yeah.
Am I going to be homeless? I mean, those are the two biggest fears that humans have. So a lot of people just don't know what to say, and they just back out of your life because they can't deal with how they feel about it. And so they can't be there for you. And that was like a secondary humongous loss that I had to go through. And I never would have thought of that. And that took a long time for me to realize and reconcile. So I would really encourage anybody who's going through that sort of thing to give those people grace, because they really just don't know what to do. They don't know how to be there for you because they don't know how to be there for themselves. And that's their biggest fear, that you're living, you're living their biggest fear.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, because it's like, you're really, the person going through it is sort of in triage mode, right? It's kind of like the difference between, what we're seeing with some of the medical issues today. You have to prioritize, and you're dealing with, the base needs that you have getting covered. You don't have time for the other things. And so it may, from the outside looking in, that you would be becoming abrupt or something like that with others, but you're just trying to take care of the most pressing things. And then the other side of it is down the road. Yeah, like you said, 5 years, but down the road, even for yourself, you're pushing everything out, right? So you're dealing with what you have to deal with. You're kind of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. You're getting scrappy. You're doing whatever you need to do. But then down the road, then you start, maybe expect that you may, if you go through a crisis, and it was a crisis, if you go through a crisis like this, expect that years down the road, there may be a wave coming back. You may have felt you left it in the rearview mirror, far behind you, but there's this wave coming back. You said that maybe 4 or 5 years later, you then felt like you had some anger. You got really pissed off, right? So it may hit you like that. That's nothing wrong with that. It's just, you've had to do what you've had to do in that triage.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the thing about grief in general. There is no timeline with grief. And that's another big lesson I learned. After the memorial service was over, everybody expects you to just get over it. Well, like you said, there's it's such a complex situation. There's so many things that are involved, and it may take you 5 years. It may take you 20 years to finally start grieving, the grieving process itself, because you have either stuffed those feelings or not dealt with things, or you have been literally too busy. As you said, I was too busy surviving. I was trying to figure out, where was I going to live? What was I going to do? I have to start a business. I have to start working. I have to get money on the table. It's just, there was so much to think about. And yes, I missed him, and I grieved him, and I wished he was still there and all that. But to really delve into the feelings that I was feeling, that really had to come later, after I got out of survival mode. Absolutely true.
Yeah. And I like the other points you made about being understanding or gracious towards others in their reaction towards you, but then also towards yourself. And so I think those are great, some great points. Why don't, if you're okay, we can move on, because you didn't just have one crisis you wanted to point to, you had another one. If you
Yes.
want to move on to crisis or a transition story thrust
Yes.
upon you, number two.
Transitions. Absolutely. And that one just happened this past March. I was early on, I got COVID. I actually came down with my fever the day before they shut Colorado Springs down, which I think was March 16th, 17th, somewhere in there. And I got very sick with COVID. I actually ended up being hospitalized for 5 days. I did not have to be ventilated. So I'm very grateful for that because I know that causes some pretty heavy duty complications. But I was on oxygen and I had fever. I had a 102, 103 fever for 8 consecutive days. And I don't even remember the last time I had a fever, and I've never had the flu. I've never been so sick in my life. And I got pneumonia, and that's what ended me up in the hospital. And during that time, I had a lot of time to think about things because I am one of those people who just goes and goes and goes and goes. I just don't stop, just survive and get it done, go get her. But those actually 12, if you count the days in the hospital, or 13 days, I had to stop. And I was so sick that I could not even watch television. Watching television was more than my brain could handle, that my body could handle. So I really had to go within. That was the only place to go. I couldn't read a book. I couldn't do anything except sleep, cough, be really hot, and think. And during that time, something happened to me, and I guess it was a near-death experience, if you will, because my oxygen levels were really low, and there was a time that I thought I could just slip away. I could. This would be easy, and I felt really calm about it. Really, I felt a lot of love surround me.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, I just felt this contentment, this well-being that I never experienced. And I've watched some shows about people who have had near-death experience, and they describe that feeling, that just incredible love and peace. Yeah. And I got there, and there was a part of my brain that said, no. You have 3 children who will be devastated if you just drift away. And so I kind of pulled it back in, and I visualized a little army, and literally with swords and shields and helmets going into my body, these little cells and fighting the coronavirus. Wow. I visualized that. And that was when I started to kind of turn things around. And I could have transitioned right out of this world, but I decided to transition to stay here. And that experience has changed everything. And so 2020 for me has been a spiritual journey. It has been a journey about spreading the word that love is really what we need to be focused on, because that's what I felt so powerfully in that moment. And I thought, okay, love is what we can take with us. That is the only thing we can take with us. And so we need to concentrate on that love while we're here. Love of ourselves, like you said, love for others. And the other thing that it really helped me with was I now have zero fear of dying. I just know it's going to be an amazing thing. It's going to be a peaceful, loving transition. And so I never was really afraid of dying, but now I zero fear, which is really cool because a lot of us fear death, or the unknown, or
Sure.
what does that mean? And I don't know if there's anything on the other side. I just know the experience is going to be fantastic because it just felt so peaceful.
So I just want to drill into something there. You said that it's changed everything since then. I mean, that's a big statement. I'm just curious what that looks like on a day-to-day
What does that
basis.
look like? That's a great question, Joe, and I have an answer for you. It's changed my perspective. You know how, the saying, don't sweat the small stuff? Boy, there is. And I used to be a worrier. I used to be angry. I've let so much of that go out of my life. And I realized that that stuff just doesn't really matter. At the end of the day and in the big picture, it just doesn't matter. It's more about being the best we can be. And so now I have this incredible drive to just live my life to its fullest potential. And life has just become so, I mean, it just sounds so trite, but it's so true. It's so precious. And I want to make every second of my life count now. I don't want to waste my time with people who are mean to me or angry or toxic, if you will. I want to embrace everything. So I'm really pursuing my speaking career, and making a difference in other people's lives, because I think that's how we heal, is by helping others.
Yeah, well, this is really interesting because I think that, well, if I can be so bold, it seems to me you've connected with your purpose, or you've connected with your passion. And people throw passion around
Absolutely.
all the time. They talk about, what's your passion? What are you good at?
Right.
But I mean, you went through this experience, and when you do connect with your passion, let's use that word, and your
Mhm.
purpose, you don't have to worry about all the stuff that's really on the periphery that you used to try to control for some reason. And
Right.
and then you evaluate everything kind of with that lens or that filter. And so that's informing what you're doing now. So as you're doing your speaking, you're still doing real estate, but
Yep.
but you're also investing more energy and more time. You, I imagine, have certain topics you like to talk about a lot,
Oh,
and
yes.
this all ties into that, right? Do you feel like it's was true for you, and maybe for a lot of people, that you're really reacting most of the time as you go through the journey of life and your career versus, yeah,
Absolutely.
just kind of curious.
And I think we're not only reacting, but we're mostly unconscious. And we're just doing what we think is expected of us. And we are pursuing goals that really, really don't matter. Like, does it really, the saying, what is enough, right?
Hmm.
Like, my feeling about money has changed. My feeling about, I really love this year of 2020 because globally, I really believe it has helped people reconnect with their families, reconnect with their friends, realize the importance of connection, of human connection. We were all buried in our phones and our technology, and now that technology is what is keeping us connected, but it's completely different than what it was doing before. And we're realizing the absolute importance of our relationships. And that is a gift as
Yeah.
far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yes, totally true. Everything has shifted. And like, for instance, I am selling stuff. I'm selling my furniture. I'm selling all this crap that I have just weighting me down. And I'm purging. I'm lightening my load, if you
There's a
will,
real
so that I
freedom there.
can concentrate. I'm
There's a
sorry?
real freedom there, I think, of
Yes,
cutting
and
all
so that
that.
I can concentrate on the messages and changing people's lives through my stories
Mhm.
and inspiring them to pursue their passions and their purpose that they might have been really afraid to before. And I want to be out there cheerleading and saying, yes, do it. This is what you should be doing in your life. If you've ever had that little voice that said, there's got to be more to life, or, I'm just not quite fulfilled, or yes, you're right. Go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And just hearing the energy of your voice, it reminds me of when I coach folks. Sometimes they're just dragging into the conversation because I think they're not connected with what really is their purpose, or what.
Yes.
There's no passion there, and they're wondering why. I mean, it's kind of like I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm exhausted.
Supposed to be doing.
A good signal,
right.
I think, a good.
Why am I not happy?
Right. I think a good indicator that you're in the right spot is that you feel like it's not work. It's, I could do this 24/7 almost. It energizes me. If you feel like what you're doing, if you're wondering if you're in transition or you should make a shift, if you feel like you're pushing a rock up the hill constantly, that's a good indicator that you're really not in the right spot. I mean, sometimes it can be just hard. There's hard work in anything you do. But if that persists over the long haul, then it's a good indicator that you really aren't in the right spot. And just hearing your voice, it's pretty cool. So 2 big stories. Different kind. They both were thrust upon you. The second one, of course, you found something there. So if you were to go back and have, here's that conversation, right? It's the lessons part, but it's kind of like the advice for your 25-year-old self, or if you could rewind, or if you could speak into the life of someone who is just starting out. Now that you've gone through these experiences, what would be some sort of takeaways or advice you would offer?
Oh my goodness. There's, like I said, there's so many
lessons
that came out of all of that. Yeah. But I did cull it down to 3. I think what helped me most was not resisting, not going at, like, for instance, the story about my husband and all of that. Horrific experience for me. But when I finally learned to embrace it, and instead of, saying, poor me, oh my God, this happened to me. Yeah, it happened to me. But once I embraced it, really took it in and said, this is happening to me, and I can choose to be really angry and blame everything, or I can look at my part in it, because I should have asked more questions. I should have, there was a lot of things I could have done differently. And once I was able to look at that and then process, so my motto is embrace and process. If you can embrace it and process your feelings and how you could have done things differently, how you can move forward. So it's kind of a mindset kind of a thing. That is so helpful, because if you're resisting the whole time, you're going to go nowhere. You're just not going to move forward. And moving forward and getting on with your life and getting on through the transition, whatever the transition is, whether it's chosen or thrust upon you, is to embrace it and process it. So that would be my number 1.
That's great.
And also to realize that let go of the worry, because everything, well, that's an absolute statement, and we shouldn't make absolutes, but most of the time, things work out. Whether we worry about them or not, they work out. We figure out a way. So trust in your intuition and your knowledge and everything, that all your tools that you have within you, trust in them, and know that it will work out one way or the other, and let go of the preconceived, oh, it should be this way. No, be open to whatever it ends up being. Because like you said, when you first started our podcast here, you said, we think it's going to be this way, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait a second, and chances are it's going to be better than you imagined. And that's what I like to to proceed in my life. That yes, I have this hardship or I have this transition, but maybe it's going to actually be better than I thought it would be. And usually it is. So keep that in mind. And then the last thing I'd like to say is keep yourself open to the love and the support that surrounds you. And I say that because we are not islands. Humans need each other.
Yeah.
We need the connection. If 2020 showed us nothing else, it showed us that we need our connections to each other. So be open to those connections. Be open to the people who want to help you, who want to support you, who want to love you. Don't push that away as you're going through your transition, no matter what it is, because people will step up. And if they ask to help you, accept their help, because you do need their help to be as successful as you can be. So those are the 3 things I have for you.
So the first one was being sort of aware and embracing what was going on.
Embracing and processing.
And the second one was, what was it again?
To know that it will all work out.
It'll all work out.
To not
get stuck, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To not get stuck and weighted down in what your vision of it should be. That you just are open to, this will work out no matter how it works out.
And then the last one was the relationship side, right?
Yes. Yeah. Stay open to the people who want to help you, because during the time that I was rebuilding my life, and to this day, I thank those people who stood by me, helped me, anywhere from loaning me money or giving me money to just letting me cry on their shoulder and, just being there for me. Be vulnerable with those people that want to be there for you, because you need that support and that love. That's what will get you through.
That's awesome. So those are great points, Vivian. This has been great. I so appreciate you coming on the podcast and going, these are tough stories to tell. My previous guests, a lot of them are, career oriented, different things they've done. I've had a few that have been this transparent, to be honest with you. And I commend you for being able to be, Brene Brown would be very proud of you.
Good.
For being very,
I admire her greatly.
For being very open. So I would like to just say that for those listening in, I know there'll be a lot of people who are listening into this and connecting on some level to both of these stories, but especially during this time right now, your second story of being near death, but also, having to accept the reality of what a lot of people have been going through. Millions of people are going through this right now worldwide. And very practical advice as well. So again, thank you so much for being on Titans of Transition. Let me ask you this question. And we can put this in the show notes, but if you're open to people contacting you to follow up, if they'd be interested in you maybe giving a talk or just engaging with you on a coaching basis or something like that, how can they reach you? What's
Absolutely.
The best way?
My website is called viviancobbspeaking.com.
Okay, great.
viviancobbspeaking.com. And you can go on there and type in your information, and I will get an email, and I'll be more than happy to reach back out to you. And whether you need to just share your story with somebody who you now think will get it, or you have an event where you think I would be a perfect fit as a speaker, or you want to be coached as a speaker, awesome. Or even on your own journey, yes, I would be more than happy to reach out and connect with you.
Vivian, thank you so much for being on Titans of Transition.
I am so happy to have been here. Thank you, Joe, for having me.
Everyone, thank you again for tuning in. And like I said, I will put some additional information about Vivian into the show notes. And please, if this has served you, like and subscribe to the podcast. It's available on all audio platforms, all the audio apps, as well as on the YouTube channel, Titans of Transition. Thanks again. Hey, thanks for joining me today in Titans of Transition. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please check the show notes for additional information. Also, please like and subscribe to this channel.